Oh, hi. We're back from break. And I have a guest in studio. Independent journalist Ivory Hecker is in studio right now. We are live streaming on social media. We are broadcasting on KPRC 950. Ivory, you are, our listeners in Houston would be very familiar with you because you kind of left the local Fox affiliate with a splash. Was that 2 years ago? Is that how long ago? 1 year ago, 2021?
2021, yeah. So it's coming up on 3 years.
How does it feel?
Good.
You were working at Fox News. I don't know. And this is Fox local. It wasn't like Fox in New York City or whatever. For those that don't know the story, you were working there and you were trying to do stories with a slightly to right of center issues like COVID vaccine mandates, border security and stuff like that.
No, that's not even, that's incorrect.
Why don't you tell the story?
It
Because I don't know.
wasn't even like right of center. I'm just about the truth. And so it was actually my boss is assigning me to a story to go cover COVID treatment at a certain hospital, United Memorial Medical Center. And I just covered what was happening there. And afterwards was threatened with firing because I let people know exactly what was happening.
And what specifically was happening that they wanted to fire you over?
Well, they were including in their treatment hydroxychloroquine. So to be threatened with firing for just reporting what's actually happening. I didn't seek the hospital out. Fox assigned me to it. But I was supposed to delete the part that was against the narrative. And that was what was a deal breaker for me, is that now journalism is out the window. They've just set a precedent. So that was the first incident of in my 8-year career at that time of being threatened with firing for doing exactly what I had done for 8 years, for doing what I was trained in journalism school to do. And nothing to do with politics, right or left of center, just here's what's happening at a hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't consider that to be, like, you were reporting on hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, COVID vaccine mandates. At least you wanted to talk about that stuff. And at the time, I mean, things changed quick in the news world. That was controversial at the time. Since then, people realize a lot of the reporting criticizing that stuff turned out to not be accurate. Rolling Stone magazine ran a story about how the emergency rooms in Oklahoma State were all tied up with ivermectin overdoses. It turned out it was completely untrue. That had never happened. But they'd claimed at the time gunshot victims weren't able to see a doctor because of people being treated with ivermectin. Of course, it was a lie.
Right. Yeah. So there was a lot of deception in the news, and it kind of got glazed over. But yeah, so that's when I decided to leave. And then during those 10 months that I was waiting to leave, trying to figure out a way to leave, there were a lot of restrictions on the truth that were happening, and just taking an unbiased approach to, like, okay, what are the viewers seeking answers on right now that's not getting answered? And of course, new vaccine technology was a huge thing, and I was at the forefront of covering it, being sent to film the very first injection in someone's arm, December 15th of 2020. And, so I was sent to cover that, and I could cover it happening. But when cases started to roll in of side effects, we had to be quiet about that.
Right.
And I also had a problem with that, because in any other story that I covered over my 8 to 9 years at that point of being a full-time reporter, we were looking out for the truth, and we were listening to viewer concerns, and let's get the people's questions answered. All of a sudden that changed in the pandemic, and it changed in regards to pharmaceuticals, in regards to treatment methodology, and then in regards to the election too, and even in regards to crime, which was my primary topic.
What was Fox Local's narrative on crime? That it wasn't a problem?
It was that the narrative was that minorities, especially Black people, were being targeted at a very high rate by police. And
because it was 2020, so that was just what was going on at the time. Of course, 4 years later, it's completely different now. Now it's back to funding the police, and people are apologizing for how we treated law enforcement. But at the time, I mean, it goes it goes in the other direction so quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of groupthink in the media, but just being a boots on the ground reporter. So I graduated journalism school in 2012, and I think the Michael Brown incident in Missouri was 2014 or something, which really I feel like that initiated this groupthink movement in the media to say that police are now after Black people for blood, you know. And it was a deceptive narrative. As a reporter, primarily covering crime all those years, I was witnessing excessive use of force by police was a thing. A lot of law enforcement have big egos and do commit acts against people of violence unnecessarily. But it was happening to every race, and it was happening to a lot of white people. And I would just see how I would go cover it for the local news, a white person being shot by police, and then it would never make national news. And the only cases that made national news were Black people, because it was a very strict narrative of let's cause America to think that police are after Black people, that white people are safe around police, and it was deceptive. And one of the last stories I covered before I left Fox in 2021 was another officer-involved incident of violence in the Houston suburbs. And as I'm driving to the scene, before I've even gotten there, my assignment manager is calling me, asking me the skin colors of the people involved.
Because that's going to affect where they place the segment in the
exactly,
broadcast.
Because National was calling Fox Corp in New York. So we were a Murdoch station, and this is why when I left, I called out Fox Corp. I called out Murdoch's, because every week my boss in Houston would be on a call with New York to craft the narrative, to control the talent. And I later learned, actually, shortly before I left Fox, I got drinks with one of the leadership at Fox Houston, and he told me that he's on those calls with my news director with New York every week, and that they are criticizing me and other talent, and that she's defending me and trying to let me be free to do.
What were you being criticized for? Just for wanting to cover stories that they didn't want you to cover?
He didn't go into specifics, but you know, he also was like, I can tell that you're like right, you're like to the right. So him saying that and saying that she's trying to let me be free, it kind of indicated that they're bothered by stories that might seem right-leaning, like that hydroxychloroquine story. They were honestly just using it. Fox sent me to that hospital. They were using hydroxychloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine got dubbed right. It has nothing to do with politics. It got dubbed right because Trump decided to be a fan of it. It's medical treatment. It is not political, you know. But because I'm going to cover what actually happened, regardless of politics, regardless of putting censorship blinders on, now I'm labeled right. Okay, I don't care. I'm going to be about the truth. If journalism is now considered right, cool. So anyway, he didn't go into those specifics, but the little things he was hinting at towards me made me feel it. I think it was a variety of things. Fox Corp was controlling what we covered, but they were also controlling our lifestyles. They wanted to make sure that all the talent were being very politically correct during the pandemic in their personal lives. Like, don't you dare take a picture on social media where you are standing closer than 6 feet from anyone, for instance. Like, I got criticized for that.
Really? Because you were at a gym or you were at a party or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, at one point, so after covering that hospital, I was put on over a month of social media censorship or blackout. Fox was like, you can't post anything. And then when my boss lifted that, she said, okay, you can post, but only stuff that I approve. So I took a picture with my videographer out on a story one day. I think we were covering the weather, like a hurricane was coming. And I was like, can I post this picture with my videographer out on this scene? And we were like 4 feet apart. She's like, no, you guys aren't 6 feet apart. Of course you can't. You can't post that.
Right. Didn't Fox National have a morning show anchor around that time who got fired because she came to work and she had a cold? I want to say her name was Heather something. Do you remember? She was the host of Fox and Friends First, the very early. I host a morning radio show, so that's how I remember this.
Wow.
One day, this woman was just missing from Fox News, and it was months later we learned, she came to work with the sniffles. And when people at, this is a New York City-based company, media company, when people at Fox News found out what happened, they couldn't fire her fast enough.
Well, I'm not surprised by that, because what happened very early in the pandemic in 2020 was that Fox Phoenix, that's where Carrie Lake was working at the time. Again, Fox Corp, we were all the biggest Fox stations around America. They're all part of the Murdoch empire. And Fox Phoenix, the reporters decided to have a little house party during the pandemic. They all got together for a party and they all got sick. And it took down the entire newsroom staff because everyone had COVID. And I actually had to do live hits for Phoenix from Houston and try to make a Houston story related to Phoenix, just because they had no content because all their reporters were sick. So after that, all the Fox Corp got very strict, including New York, very strict about a lot of COVID rules.
So for those that don't know this story, and I'm sure a lot of our Houston listeners do, you were in the mainstream media. You were on the nightly news. You were one of the top reporters that they were sending out. Were you filling in as anchor sometimes? You were there regularly doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I used to anchor the Saturday evening news every weekend. And
COVID hit, and that's when you went from just being a local reporter to a national name, because you were on TV saying, I'm gonna spill the beans. I'm gonna say things they don't want me to say. And and you were fired almost immediately, I take it?
Yeah, they actually never told me that I was fired. They were too scared to talk to me. But it was reported in the media that I was fired. I was like, okay, some article says I'm fired. I guess I am, which was my goal. At that point, I wanted to, I had to get out of Fox, and there was no clause in my contract that would allow me to leave.
So you technically were never fired. You could show up tomorrow and be like, what?
You didn't tell me.
Hey, if you're just turning on your radio, I'm talking to Ivory Hecker. We're live streaming on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and she is a very controversial reporter from Houston, Texas. Quick break. We're going to be right back with more from her right after this.
This is Kenny Webster's Pursuit of Happiness on KPRC 950, Houston.
Hey, to those of you watching us streaming on social media right now, stand by. You are watching a recording session of some radio that will air later this afternoon on KPRC 950 in Houston. And right now, I'm just saving that segment, so stand by. We'll be right back. All right, we're live in studio with Ivory Hecker, and we've been telling the story about how you worked at Fox News, local, and you were doing coverage in big markets like Phoenix because of the pandemic. And if it wasn't for COVID, odds are you'd probably still be in the mainstream media. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But because of what happened during the pandemic, things got so weird, it opened your eyes. And you left, and we covered that story in the last segment. So you've moved on. You're doing some big stuff now as an independent reporter, including a docuseries that you were just telling me about called Beyond the Surface of America. It's boots on the ground style reporting. You went down to the border, and that is it airs on Unified, which is, I think, a streaming service online, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's right. They have a TV app, iPhone app, and all that. You can stream Unified. They're very uncensored, so I like that. And we explored unique aspects of each state. We went through 8 different states for this first season. And right now we're on episode 4, which is Texas, and we had to make it down to the border to see what's really going on down there.
Where did they send you at the border specifically? Like Eagle Pass, McAllen? Where did you go?
Yeah, I was the co-boss, so we sent ourselves, me and Elizabeth Lane, we sent ourselves down to Eagle Pass because that's the hot spot of controversy where in the past couple months people were wondering, is this going to become like civil war between Texas and the federal government?
Right.
Because the Border Patrol wants to take down the fencing down there, and Governor Abbott is trying to build it back up, and it's this face-off. But here's the thing. When we went down there to film, Texas National Guard military troops in their camo were assisting migrants across the border. So that those border fences that Governor Abbott is so adamant about building as Border Patrol tears them down, Governor Abbott's troops were helping illegal immigrants over the fences.
That's the thing that always surprises people is you get down there and they're handing out Lunchables, they're handing out Capri Suns. Apparently the U.S. Border Patrol was handing out copies of Kamala's book, or one of the non-governmental organizations was. And that sounds like a joke, but they were literally handing out copies of her book to people as they were walking over the border.
Wow. Yeah. So it's just such mixed signals you get. And it's like, hold on. So is Governor Abbott just putting on a facade and he's actually in alignment with Joe Biden? Because when you get down there, Abbott's troops and Biden's troops, the Border Patrol, are working very closely together in lockstep to bring illegals in.
Right.
Not stop them from entering. And so, although there's portions of the border where they are blocking migrants, so it's like, what is going on? And I think that Governor Abbott just isn't fully aware of what some of his troops are doing. Some of the National Guard just goes with the Border Patrol because once they're in each other's faces, Border Patrol is a higher up agency. That's a federal agency. Even though National Guard is part of the Army, but they were sent out there by the governor. Border Patrol was sent by the president.
Right.
And so, needless to say, what we filmed at the border was National Guard troops helping migrants over fencing after migrants illegally swam across the Rio Grande. Then they hand those migrants off to Border Patrol, and Border Patrol puts them on a bus, takes them to a processing facility. They print out their paperwork, notice to appear. They then send them off to a nonprofit like Catholic Charities.
Right, the NGOs.
Yes, and then that's where they show their notice to appear, which is proof they're an illegal immigrant. And once they have that proof, then they get all the goodies.
Then they're not illegal anymore.
Tax dollars. Well, the paperwork says they are, but they're treated, like better than an American. We wouldn't get all these freebies.
Right.
But right now there's a program in place, which I looked up all the financial information. It's on FEMA.gov, that a certain amount of tax dollars, over $300 million per fiscal year, has been allocated to illegal immigrants to make sure that they have housing, transportation, plane tickets, taxi rides, and everything to wherever they want to go.
Yeah. 20 years ago, talking about the broken immigration system or immigration crisis in general, it was something liberals were very concerned about. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, as a senator, voted to build a border, a fence, they called it. They didn't call it a wall at the time. 20 years ago, criticizing Big Pharma. That was a very liberal thing to do. And now the political landscape shifted, and these are suddenly considered to be conservative opinions or conservative positions. But as a journalist, you don't consider yourself to be right wing. You don't think that this is conservative. You just consider it to be journalism.
Exactly. I'm just covering what's actually happening. I've actually never been a conservative in my life. A lot of people label me that way these days because I'm covering things that are outside the narrative. So to get the missing facts, that's considered conservative now? Like, okay, but I'm not. And actually my biggest hate group is conservatives because they actually find out that I'm not. What they welcome me into their club and they realize I love freedom more than conservatives do. And then they start freaking out at me. Liberals don't know I exist because they don't pay attention to any facts outside the narrative. So I don't get hate from liberals because they just don't know I exist. But I get hate from conservatives because I'm not one.
But when you left Fox Local, you must have gotten some criticism from local journalists. I mean, people knew who you were. This was a pretty big news story when it happened a couple years back.
No, get this. I didn't get hate from journalists. I got secret love. The ones who were brave enough to reach out and say, thank you for speaking for us, but don't let anyone know that I told you that.
They didn't want the word to get out.
And they're all mainstream media people because this was not about political leanings. This was about the truth. And people were so appalled. You know, it doesn't matter. And I will say that the majority of newsrooms are left leaning, absolutely. You're free to talk about your leftist politics in a newsroom, but if you mention any right-wing politics, then you're like cast out. So anyone on the right in a newsroom just stays quiet. But which I think a good newsroom, you need to tone down your personal opinions anyways a lot and just seek the truth a lot. But
sure, it's corporate America, right?
Yeah, but these people in the pandemic, it was so clear this is not politics. This is censoring truth. This medical stuff is not politics. So people were just so appalled. And when I finally went and covered what I was forbidden from covering, I did a full in-depth. See, I didn't care about COVID treatment until they blocked me from covering it. And then I said, what's going on? And when I left Fox, I did an in-depth 17-minute video report where I sought the truth that was censored and the one doctor I got in trouble for covering, I was like, I went back and interviewed him. Hey, did you know I got in trouble for talking with you and reporting what you said? And he said, I know a lot of reporters tell me that they can't report what I'm doing.
Did you ever talk to Dr. Mary Bowden from Breathe MD? She's like the spokesperson for criticizing the COVID narrative in Houston. She's probably the most prominent healthcare worker for going out and pushing things like ivermectin or alternatives to the vaccines. And look what it did to her.
Well, yeah, I did cover her once I left Fox. Yeah,
but not when you were there. You weren't allowed to talk to her.
She hadn't even entered the news. She hadn't even come out until after I did.
Right.
Yeah, but it turned out that ivermectin was just completely censored. There was an absolute media blackout in America against it.
Yeah. If you're just turning on your radio, I am talking to independent journalist Ivory Hecker. She's telling us about Beyond the Surface of America that is co-produced and airs on the Unified Network. And who did you produce that with?
Elizabeth Lane, another independent journalist.
And what is next for you guys? You collaborate with her a lot?
Oh, this is our first collaboration together, and it turned out so great. She's a rare independent journalist that's very much like me, very much interested in the same things and very much fearless as well. So I think we may do a season 2. We shall see. But this is episode 4 airing now on Texas. Now we proceed through various other states. And what you find in an upcoming state is that we stumble upon a homeless encampment of migrants they literally crossed the border at Eagle Pass. This is the state of Colorado. We're up in Colorado, very far from the border, and there's this sea of tents in the dead of winter when we film this, of these migrants who were given a free 2-week hotel stay at the hands of our tax dollars. So they got a free bus ticket or plane ride and then a free hotel, all paid for by us, but that only lasted for 2 weeks. Now they're homeless in a tent in the dead of winter in Colorado. These people from Venezuela who don't speak English. And they're like, am I going to survive in America? And so what we seem to be witnessing is a massive scam against these people from around the world seeking a better life and against the American people who are funding it against their will. And some of that gets exposed in this docuseries.
That is very cool. Ivory Hecker, follow her on social media. You can find her on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Where's your biggest audience? I assume YouTube is where you're putting long-form content out.
I do long-form news analysis on YouTube, but my biggest audience is actually Instagram. I have 200,000 followers right there.
Where have you been censored the most?
TikTok.
Really?
Yes, they completely wiped out my TikTok profile at one point. I appealed saying, look, I went to one of the best journalism schools in America. I do journalism. This is uncalled for. And they actually believed it and put me back on TikTok, but they've taken down more of my journalistic posts than any other platform. TikTok is a very pro censorship.
For me, it is Facebook. We have 450,000 followers on our Facebook account. There are 7 people that can see us streaming right now. I have about 40,000 followers on Twitter. There's almost 200 people watching us there. I mean, if that's not a shadow ban, I don't know what is. How are 450,000 people following us and only 7 people can see this live stream?
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Right now, I don't get a lot of engagement on Facebook either, and who knows why. But as far as strikes and deleting your posts and saying that, fact checking you and whatnot, I've received most of that on TikTok, but I've received a lot of that on Instagram and Facebook. I've received Facebook fact checks written by PolitiFact that are fake.
Sure. Of course they are. Yeah. And it's garbage because early on, a lot of it was censoring people and telling them you can't talk about the Wuhan lab leak theory. Now that's the most common theory about how the pandemic started. We got to wrap this up. Ivory Hecker, follow her on Twitter and social media, wherever you're at, and, YouTube. And, of course, check out the work that she just did. You could find on Unified, called Beyond the Surface of America. Ivory, thank you so much for coming in today, and thank you for the work that you do. I think it's really cool that you did this.
Thank you for having me. Oh, and really quick, be careful when you search for me on TikTok. There's a ton of fake profiles of me that actually have more followers than me.
I think that's the difference between being a guy and a girl on social media.
I found a profile that has like 100,000 followers, a million likes. It's not me. It's just on TikTok.
And you've reported it?
They're just reposting my stuff. And I was like, okay, that's good. They're amplifying my voice, but they're not me.
I think it's cool that you found the account I created for you. That's all.
I just hope they don't have like scam links for you to click and then you get robbed of your money. So just be careful about the fake profiles.
I 100% guarantee that they do. Anyway, we got to run. I'm Kenny Webster. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, y'all.
You are listening to the Pursuit of Happiness Radio. Tell the government to kiss your ass.